Hope for HIE social worker. Thank you so much for joining us for this special installment of our Hope for HIE Dad series. Today I have Brandon, Ram, and Andy here, and they are three dads in our Hope for HIE community. Brandon and Ram are also currently peer support mentors for dads in our Hope for HIE community, and tonight is just a great time for them to share and for us to connect, and just for dads to connect with each other and provide support and just kind of share about their journey. So what I'd like to do to start is just remind everybody we are not giving any type of medical advice or, kind of giving any specifics. Anything medical related, please go to your child's medical team. This is sort of just a place to share and just to get some more information. So if you guys would like to just do a short little introduction about yourself and your family, we can get started with that. Brandon, you want to go first?
Sure. Yes, my name Brandon, and I live in Pittsburgh with my wife Anna, and we have a son Vernon who just turned 5, and he's got moderate to severe HIE, but couldn't love him any more than we do, and really glad to have found the Hope for HIE organization, and really glad to be a part of this and get a chance to talk to other dads. So really excited for tonight.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. Hey, everybody. I'm Andy Cressman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I live in New Orleans with my wife, Sarah. Our son, Cole, is our child with HIE. He's a few months away from his 13th birthday, which is kind of scary to think about. And then we also have a 10-year-old daughter named Amelia. And yeah, this is a great opportunity. I think the dad voices are often not heard enough. So looking forward to chatting with Ram and Brandon and everybody else that's logged on.
I guess I'll go next. Hi everyone, I'm Ram. I'm from Perth, Western Australia. It's 9 o'clock in the morning over here. I have a son, Bodhi, who is turning 9 in December. I live with my wife and another son, a 3-year-old. Bodhi has a very complex life. He has high complex needs. Been part of the HIE journey for a couple of years now, and very much looking forward to the chat and getting to know you all.
Thank you guys for the introduction. What I think might be the best place to start is sort of just sharing a little bit about those early days in the NICU and kind of watching the birth and the delivery. And I know in many different groups I've been a part of with different dads in the HIE community, sharing about watching your partner go through medical trauma and watching your child go through medical trauma stirs up a lot of feelings, and there's just a lot of thoughts. So I thought maybe we could start there and just sort of share about, your experience and kind of what you may have wished you knew back then, or things that you think would be helpful to other dads. I think that'd be a great place to start tonight.
I
can go in order, Brandon, Andy, and Ron.
Yeah.
That's the lineup, huh?
All right. So my son, he actually was born 4 months premature and did not have his HIE at birth, but because of his extreme prematurity, he very shortly thereafter contracted very severe illness that went septic, and the sepsis at that very premature stage caused the hypoxic event. So little bit, I guess, different of a journey, arriving at a similar result. Still watching my wife give birth to a baby 4 months premature, and just the emotions there. They gave us 50-50 chance that our child survives, and then a 50-50 chance that he makes it out of the NICU without any kind of major, any kind of major medical issues like HIE and the resulting issues. So that's just very briefly our story. We were in the NICU for 6 months, and thinking about what I wish I would have known at that time. I mean, I think we're all increasingly familiar with the wait and see period, where you're just not sure what's going to happen, and that roller coaster of emotions. Probably wish I had someone tell me, try not to ride that roller coaster of, it's going to be great. It's going to work out fine. It's going to be, you just don't know how it's going to turn out. And it's hard place to be in, but um, by not riding that roller coaster quite so much, being able to be more focused and present on just helping my not just my wife and my child have the best outcomes, but for me in that instance, being present, how can all three of us get through this the best?
Ours, our story is a little different. Cole was full term, and the HIE incident happened during labor and delivery, and he was born in the NICU of one hospital, and about 6 or 7 hours after he was born, it was a real roller coaster from the get go, because he was born and he was breathing, but Apgar scores were low, and he was really not as responsive as a newborn is supposed to be. So I could sort of feel the tension in the room, what was going on, and was really kind of in shock in retrospect. I don't think I realized I was in shock at the time, but in retrospect, it was definitely a form of shock. And they popped an air bubble in his stomach. He started, crying, behaving like a newborn's supposed to. And then we kind of went to bed thinking everything was okay. And then the NICU resident woke us up in the middle of the night. He'd started having seizures. And so they had to intubate him. And the next morning, the NICU where he was born was really small at the time, so it didn't have all the capacity for what he needed. And so he had to be transported to the Children's Hospital, which is about a couple of miles down the road from where we were. And Sarah had to have an emergency C-section, so she had to stay. She was bedridden, and I had to go down there, to the NICU, where he had to have an EEG and then an MRI. And the EEG was basically flat, and so then he had to have an MRI. And my dad, who's a retired radiologist, asked to see the images, and he went and saw the images, and he came back out, and I was 32 at the time Cole was born, and I'd never seen my dad cry until that day. He came back out and said it was the worst images he'd ever seen in a neonate. Couldn't even manage to call his grandson by his name. And so at that point, I kind of lost it, and really went into protection mode, because Sarah obviously was texting me for updates from this other hospital. And this is not something I was, gonna be able to text her. I knew she knew what was up, but I had to wait until we got back to the other hospital to break the news. And so those first couple of days were awful, obviously. And Cole spent about a month in the NICU, and I don't think anybody ever definitively said there was a chance we would lose him. It was kind of alluded to a lot. But thankfully he started eating more and getting to the like checking the boxes that needed to be checked to get discharged. And so here we are. He is severely affected, though. He's got cerebral palsy, still has seizures, nonverbal, and so he's what would be considered severely affected. I don't know what I would have done differently back then. I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I do have some lessons that I look at in retrospect, and that's to just allow yourself to be vulnerable and understand that it's just as traumatizing on you as a parent, on your wife as a mom. And it seems obvious now, but it kind of took me a long time to realize that, and to accept that it was something that was traumatizing for me too, and just to allow myself to be vulnerable and admit that's something that I needed to sort of come to terms with.
Thanks for sharing, Andy. Look, my journey also traumatic. I think there's no surprises there. Son was born full term and came out what we thought was the perfect, robust, cute little boy, but within seconds, the nurses said to me, Dad, we're going to have to press a button. Lots of noises are going to happen. Lots of people are going to rush in. We need you to stand over there. The HIE event happened sometime during birth. We're not sure where or why or how, but tests of the placenta afterwards showed that there was a lack of oxygen that was present. So that was fairly traumatic. My son had to be resuscitated over a couple of hours, and because my wife had an episiotomy and it was 2 o'clock in the morning and they didn't have as many doctors, my wife was stuck on the birthing bed essentially by herself. And had I known that, I probably would have been destroyed a little bit more. So my wife, seeing her hopeless and afraid and worried and scared, that still haunts me, because I was basically going from the emergency room to the birthing room, and seeing my son getting resuscitated and my wife being distraught. It kicked something in me that I had never experienced before, which was just full. I don't want to even say hero mode, but just full dad mode, where I knew that I had to be the strength and voice of reason, and I had to fix it, and I had to destroy anything that got in my way. And I bottled up all my emotions and only used the ones that I needed, which was fight, care, and learn and get shit done. We then had to get rushed to the children's hospital. Obviously, Bodhi was being cooled. This was, after several hours of him being resuscitated, and finally, seeing the flat line on the screen is some surreal shit that I still try to cope with. Sorry, I swore there, Haley. I know this is getting recorded. And then seeing my wife literally get up, and after she got stitched up, and basically said, "We're going to the hospital," whilst everyone in the previous hospital said, "No, you need to stay here. You need to stay here." She, her bravery and strength and courage actually feeded mine, and became more strong because of that. I think in that very one moment, I'd never been so close and more solidified and more strengthened with my wife than at any other moment in our lives, that we knew that we had to look after our son. Our son needed us, and nothing was going to stop us from being next to him. I stayed in the NICU area, didn't leave the hospital for 26 days. Except for once where I went to church at midnight mass, because my son was born in December. I'm not even religious, but I thought I needed to do something. And that was the only time I left the hospital, came back. And, talking about the journeys moving forward, one thing I'd hoped, one thing that really helped me is taking it step by step, day by day, because you've got so many pathways that you need to choose and decide. And the one piece of advice, which a lot of the nurses, a lot of the doctors all said, just take it step by step, hour by hour, minute by minute. If you have to, forget about everything else. And one thing that actually, I'll finish off on this, that shocked me, but realized in hindsight was very true, was a home nurse who came to our house many months later and said, "I've seen this happen a couple of times. This is going to take you a couple of years, maybe 3 years, before you can get yourself on your feet and start getting your shit together." I didn't believe her. I did not think that was going to be a thing. I thought, I'm going to get stuff done within days. I'm going to call a couple of people and it'll all be fixed. But she was very right. And literally we were in fight and flight mode for 3 years. And then that's when my PTSD started to present itself, which is a whole different story. But yeah, that was our beginning days at NICU. So we were there in and out for the first 6 months.
Thank you guys for sharing. I know just hearing someone share a story where other dads, can relate on any piece of it. Can be so powerful just to connect. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about is, that NICU experience is just very different. And for most of our families in the HIE community, it isn't something that you're expecting, because you don't expect to go into preterm labor. You don't expect for your baby and your partner to have a complicated delivery, because for most of our families, the pregnancy is uncomplicated and it's a typical pregnancy. So in the NICU experience, did you feel included in that? Do you feel like the medical team included you in things? Did you feel supported? If you did, what did they do to help you? If they didn't, what do you think, looking back, do I wish would have been done differently? Or maybe that, just anything in that kind of NICU early experience, or even later on with like doctor's visits and, medical providers, like what works, what doesn't work, what can you kind of give feedback to other parents, especially those that are in those early years, and especially, navigating new providers and like new experiences.
Guess I'm up first again, huh? I mean, no one knows your kid better than you. And the doctors, they know a lot, but they've got a lot of patience. And so I would say that to some degree, they tried to involve us. To a greater degree, we had to learn, and especially my wife doesn't love confrontation. I had to learn to be a squeaky wheel. And sometimes you just got to make some noise, and sometimes be a little bit aggressive to just get attention. And it materially and in a good way altered the course of our son's care. So again, we were in the NICU for 6 months. So we got very familiar with the staff, and like you, Rom, I mean, I think I slept at home less than 10 times, my wife less than 5 times over the 6 months. There was a sofa and pull out, like a pull out trundle bed in the hospital room, and we just stay in the room with him through the night. And I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that our involvement changed the course of care in a good way. So I would say, if you're a dad in that situation, yes, the doctors know a lot, and yes, respect. And to your point, Rom, have that feeling of trying to learn as much as possible. But you've got to be an advocate, and sometimes you got to be a little bit of a loud advocate. There's a lot of patients at these hospitals.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on the. My wife is also on the non-confrontational side, and quite frankly, I'm not really all that confrontational of a person. But when the rubber meets the road, I'm the one really that has stepped up. Sometimes I joke, like, we had to. This wasn't a NICU, but like we had to have a call with the school a couple of years ago because he had initially been denied some services. And we have a good working relationship with the team at the school. So it was a little awkward, but I was very aggressive with them. And Sarah was in tears about it. And we joked, I'm like, all right, was it my aggressiveness for the win, or was it your tears for the win? And whatever. It was a team effort. But as far as like services, I feel like we got good support in the NICU. We were there for a month. I feel like getting mental health, and I don't even know if I would have gone for this at the time, but some sort of counseling for parents, both mom and dad at the time, to kind of explain, hey, you're going through a traumatic process right now. And Rom, you summed it up so well. It's like you're in fight or flight for so many, in my case, for probably 10 years, I'm in fight or flight, fix it mode. We oftentimes, like, I go through this controversy with my wife where she'll talk to me about a problem, and my initial instinct as a man is to offer solutions to that problem, when really she just wanted me to empathize and hear her problem. And so I think that's something we kind of habitually do as men. So you've got a child that has significant disabilities, that have a lot of problems that need fixing, right? So that's that kind of mode you're in. And it's a level of despair hopelessness and despair that I've never thought experience. And it's only been with time that I've seen, how traumatic that actually was. And I think it would have helped earlier on if somebody would have told me that, rather than me kind of figuring it out for myself, and letting me know that it's okay to express other emotions that aren't necessarily, are less socially acceptable for men. Like obviously anger is cool, right? Problem solving, it's like you said, like Ram said, like allowing certain emotions to come to the surface and burying others. I did the exact same thing. And I eventually went to a therapist and kind of worked through all these things. And that's really helped me out a lot, as sort of, and then part of the reason I wanted to do this was to put myself out there and, sort of publicly say how, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have these emotions, and realize that this is traumatic on you as a dad as well, and to seek help for that as early as you can, and recognize when you're in fix it mode and fight or flight mode that sometimes you just got to slow down and take care of yourself as well.
That's so important.
I think I've rambled way past answering your question, but that's
no. This is exactly what this is about.
All important. It's all important. For me, in the NICU days, a little bit different for me. I very randomly knew some of the doctors, and I've always lived in and around the hospital system. My dad was a doctor before he passed. So I was very comfortable with the language and very comfortable talking to people. And I knew that they were people as well. Plus, one of the top doctors was one of my clients in my previous roles. So I was able to just talk. And one thing that I didn't realize I was doing was I was using my strengths to fix things, to fight things, which was, I'm a really good networker. I'm really good at recruiting people and bringing them to my side. And I was able to talk to doctors and bring them to my side, and nurses, and make them feel for us rather than just treat us as a number or something like that. I'm sure they don't always mean to do that, and they don't always do that, but I know that other people have experienced that they're just this patient, or this is, thing that they need to get their day past. But I use those strengths and my just to your point, Andy, where, was it the tears, or was it your assertiveness, or your anger, or whatever it was? Yeah, my wife and I, we played to our strengths, and we didn't realize that we were cooperating in that way. But she would often use her softness, and then I would often use my assertiveness, or other words, my sledgehammer approach. And just so you know, like when you're when you're saying being an advocate, Brandon, sometimes being an advocate to me is being the sledgehammer and being the rude guy, because my son couldn't, and I'm happy to be the villain. Like I've often, when my wife and I go, so who should send this email to tell this person we no longer want to work with them, and we decide who's going to be the villain. And I don't mind being and I never used to be like that. I've always used to be a people pleaser. But when it came to, family and things like that, this sort of weirdness came out of me where I'm going to be the villain. I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm happy to tell this person, you're a POS. We don't want you in our house anymore. And you've got to learn that. And two things I would love to say to people, it's just like Andy said, and Brandon, I'm sure you've done the same, is seek mental health support. I didn't do it till my PTSD started really affecting my life really badly. I'll quickly say how I knew I had PTSD. I went to work one day, drove to work, middle of summer, turned off the car. I was parked behind the office so people could see me, right? And I didn't get out of the car till it was time to go home. I just had sat there and going, I didn't realize I'd sat here for 8 hours. And then I realized, okay, that's PTSD. I'd been sitting, and I think I'd done that several times, but not actually realize I'd sat in my car, switched off with my hands on the wheel, and just sat there. That was PTSD. The other thing I would advise when you're in that NICU environment is follow your gut. You know, Brandon said, you know your child more than anyone else, but also you know what is right and what is wrong. And you ever get that feeling or that red flag or that weird, this doesn't sit right, pull that string and pull it till you get to the end and find out what the hell that means. And if it means you say, stop, hang on a second, I don't think we want to do this. And there's been many instances we've actually done that, where they've actually suggested operations, or, you know, they wanted to cut out my son's saliva glands. And they said, oh, yeah, this is a common thing. You know, we should book this in. And we did some research on it, and we went, okay, well, hang on a second. What this might do is actually make it worse for him to swallow and keep his airways clear, because you still, your tongue still creates saliva. You don't need saliva glands to create saliva. So we didn't know that, but had that happen, there would have been potentially a higher risk of him choking and having that dry mouth, or even have that slightly thicker mucus, which is what your tongue produces, not your saliva glands. So there was this gut feeling that told us, hey, we've got to stop this. We need to do some research, and we pushed it back. And we remember the nurse coming in, not the nurse, the doctor coming in and getting shitty at us and saying, oh, well, other parents do this. And I went, well, we're not other parents, mate. You can come back later. What's your name, by the way? Oh, thank you. I'll make a note of that. And when they know that there's a good and bad side of you, you know, because we're going to be at hospitals pretty much every couple of weeks or couple of months for the first, you know, few years. And for us, we're always at the hospital. So they start to get to know you, and they start to respect you, because you treat the good doctors rightly and you treat them with respect. And I'd never swear at them, by the way. I'm never abusive, because you just don't abuse those people. And they start to respect you. The doctors start understanding, and they start to refer to you for decision making, as opposed to telling you exactly what it is, and they start to collaborate with you. So that's something that we learnt, and luckily we learnt in time as well. So yeah.
I think next time I have to be the villain, I'm going to do it in an Australian accent, because that just sounds cooler than my accent.
It's a good idea, Andy.
Yeah.
Rom, I just want to add on, like what you said made me think of how, you know, you're right. There are good doctors, and something that some of the other families that were in the NICU at the same time and kind of got out of the NICU at the same time, like, you know, we went through different doctors, different neurologists, you know, different pediatricians, till we found the right team. And so, you know, yeah, I think you were talking about, you know, being the villain and having to sort of say, we're not going to work with you anymore. We had definitely had to say that. And I would say to any parent at that stage, like, find doctors that are doing a great job that you're comfortable with. And like you said, Rom, your gut will tell you. Like we get good gut instincts about a doctor, and then we find out, yeah, they're kind of famous for being great doctors in that area. So
I have a quick story about following your gut instinct. That's so true. And it's easy, if you're not a doctor or in the medical profession, to just be so deferential to what you're being told, but you really do know your child better than they do. And like with Cole, he G-tube fed, and you know, he was having these like horrible gagging and retching spells, because he had a whole separate story. But the Nissen fundoplication, which is when they wrap the top of your stomach around your esophagus to prevent vomiting, for reflux, he had that done. And so we were just feeding him all these different formulas. His body wanted to vomit them up, but he was just gagging. Like, it got to the point where we had to take, like, I had a gag chart, like on an Excel spreadsheet, to you know, annotate how many times this was happening per day. And we saw so many different specialists about it. We even drove over to Houston, Texas Children's, and saw like some super specialist, and they were all gracious, and I certainly admire their expertise. But what really ended up solving the problem was us switching what he was eating from, like, the formulas that, instead of trying a 10th different formula, hey, let's try feeding him real food. And we actually, I think it was on Hope for HIE. We probably just asked a question in the forum, like, hey, any of y'all that tube feed, like any good recipes, you'll make your own food. And that literally solved the problem that had probably persisted for over a year, for which we had seen, I think, 5 different doctors. And of course, like different procedures were offered as a solution. And that's not to be overly critical of the medical profession. That's more to illustrate, like, I just knew in my gut, like it's something like, what if it's as simple as just feeding him real food? You know what I mean? And yeah, sure enough, that and listening to other parents that had had similar experiences ended up addressing the issue.
One of the things I want to touch on for a little bit before we start getting closer and closer to the end of the hour is the transition back to work or back to kind of whatever you had planned after the birth of your child to go back to. Because I think for a lot of families and a lot of the support groups, this is such a big topic that everybody talks about and trying to figure out, because you go in to deliver this child and you kind of have a timeline of when you think you're going to deliver, about how long you're going to be in the hospital, what, everyone's return to work or schooling or whatever your, role was prior to the pregnancy, and then just how a lot of that can change in just an instant, and how what works for your child after the delivery, what you had planned may not be. So if you guys could just talk a little bit about that journey. I know that it comes up time and time again in different ways in the community and then on Facebook and then also in the support groups, that would be great.
So I'm really fortunate that I worked for an employer that was extremely understanding. So when this happened, our CEO called me up and said, "Listen, you do whatever you have to do, and let us know, and we'll support you." Um, so that persisted through the 6 month NICU stay. They're very gracious. Then I would say, well, we actually came home during COVID, so add a whole other layer of weird work dynamics that we're trying to figure out. Um, at some point there started to be expectations, and I think that I think about this with wars and things like that. Like it's in the news, it's everywhere, and then it's still going on, and you think about it less. You think about it less, but the people who are over there are living it every day. I think as parents, we never stop living this, but I think that employers, friends,
Mhm.
at first you're always on their mind, they're reaching out, and then after a time it trails off. So I think that there did come a time where some of that grace got a lot less. So that was that was sort of like a wake up call, like, okay, I have to figure this out. And I'll say for me, going back to work full time, and there it's still not really full time in the sense of I feel like I'm always a dad first, before anything else, and my job is a part of providing for my family. But other parents, other dads, like I had someone say to me, well, you can't just expect to go home and just bathe the kid, and sometimes you got to put in the hours. I'm like, well, if I don't go home and help bathe the kid, he's going to drown. Like, that's a 2 person job, and they don't realize that. And so um, yeah, it's sort of another manifestation of what we've been talking about, which is being willing to be the villain, be a little aggressive, and in a nice way sometimes, just sometimes be charming, but do what you have to do to sort of make sure that I'm prioritizing my family first, and realizing that's not what I thought it would be, and it's not what it necessarily is for other families. There's just times you just have to bite the bullet and say, whatever happens is going to happen here.
Yeah, my career is taking a completely different trajectory as a result. I'm an attorney by trade, and I was at the time at a firm. And I don't know what y'all know about the legal industry and private law firms, but you have annual billable hour requirements. Mm. And I was at a really good firm, and similar to you, Brandon, like they were super supportive early on, and it couldn't have been nicer about stuff. and I'm still have a good relationship with all of them at that firm. But at around the night, he was about, when did I leave? I think he was 9 months old, so it was like September of that year. I ended up leaving because I saw, not that they were adversarial or stopped being supportive, but I kind of knew, to your point, like, okay, at the end of the day, they're here to bill hours and make money, and they're gonna, I'm the one that's dealing with this every day, and the supportiveness is probably going to wane over time. And both my wife and I work full time, and so I didn't want her to have to take the lion's share of the appointments and therapy sessions and stuff. So we ended up having a conversation. I had an opportunity to leave and go into federal service, which is what I still do. Um, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think we should do here? Do you want me to try and focus on work and make as much money as we can, and then you sort of take the lion's share of stuff with Cole, or would you rather have my time?" And without missing a beat, she's like, "I'd rather have your time." And so we joke now, though, because like on our, when we got married, she thought she was marrying like a downtown lawyer with a certain income potential, and now she's just married to a dipshit federal employee, and jokes on her. But no, it really has, like, it took a long time, but I've got a fantastic job now with tons of flexibility. I count my blessings every day because it really does allow me to make a living and have fulfilling work, and also be there for Cole. And I know not everybody is that lucky, but yeah, I would, just, family always comes first, and if you can find a job, even if you don't like the job, at least if your supervisor or your boss understands your situation intimately. Like, it's not just, hey, look, this is not just me wanting to be a dad. Like, hey, I've got a kid that's 12 and needs to be carried, and his wheelchair needs to be put in and out of the car, and my wife is getting to the point where she can't do that, and I'm the one with the strong back and a weak mind that can do that. And so it's having employers that understand sort of your unique needs. I think don't be shy about, like, disclosing that and being transparent about that. And I just wish everybody had the luck that I've had with, managing to find a career that really lets me do both. But yeah, totally different trajectory. I'd probably be even more insufferable than I am now had I still been at the law firm, being the downtown barrister, billing hours.
Yeah, I think there'll be parts of my story that resonate with yours, Andy. I was in America, you call them realtors. In Australia, we call them real estate agents. So I sold property, made a lot of money. I was top end capitalist, if you like. Loved it, and my wife liked the money. We had several properties, but in the ensuing years that followed Bodhi's birth, yeah, my appetite for real estate and picking up the phone at odd hours and being 24/7 on call and working weekends fell away. Like everyone else, I had a really good organization that were very understanding, very supportive, did what they could in terms of helping me out with money. They did a little mini fundraiser. I was actually up for long service leave. They let me cash that in so I could pay off bills. I essentially didn't work for 3 months. And I was, during the pregnancy, I was super motivated to earn money. So I'd had a bit of leftover money coming through, so I was able to support myself in that way. But eventually, but get to the point, how was the transition? It wasn't a good transition, and that was mainly because of my mental health, which I hadn't realized, and me sort of coming to grips with being a dad, being a real estate agent, providing money. Where I was getting my head redone because I didn't know what was more important, or if I did, I wasn't able to articulate it or put it into practice. So, and eventually I just fell out of love of real estate. I didn't like the idea of negotiating, all the crappy stuff, and it just felt so mundane, and so all the passion I had for it just dropped away. I was like, why am I even doing this? I had one lady, call me up and say, "Oh, you tricked me into buying this," and I was like, you know what? I'm fed up. That's done. I'm out. And luckily, I had friends in the not-for-profit sector that were able to sort of guide me to work into charities. So I've worked for 3 charities now in 4 years, each being very supportive and understanding of my cause. 2 of the charities, one I'm currently at now, work with disability. So it really helps me sort of, because it is sort of a 2-for-1 deal, if you like. I'm helping other people, which then helps me, which then makes me understand the disability sector a little bit more, so I can then help my own family. And yeah, I am blessed, and whilst I'm not religious, I do count my blessings, because I think that somehow, I don't like saying I've landed on my feet, but somehow I've landed okay. I have a lot of flexibility, and all the organisations that I've ever worked with truly understand and have been very supportive. So I've been very lucky in that sense.
Thank you guys for sharing. I know we're getting towards the end of our time before we open it up for the non-recorded portion, but I want to open the floor for a few minutes. Is there anything that you guys came to tonight or this morning to share, or that you brought that you were like, you know what, this is something I want to share with the other dads in the HIE community? If so, this is your opportunity for each of you to share any words of wisdom or anything that you feel like either you would have wanted to hear, or that you just feel led to share with somebody.
I've got something. I would say, and I think I mentioned this on the last one here, Haley, but I would say that my biggest advice is to remember that having a child with HIE, with special needs disabilities, is a form of grief, and it's not like losing a loved one in death, but it is a form of loss. But it's a form of grief, and that's important to remember. And it's something I have to remind myself of all the time, because a corollary to that concept is the fact that no 2 people grieve in the same way. And so I have to remind myself of that a lot in the context of my marriage, because my strategy is generally to get shit done, to move forward, to, kind of like take action and move the needle. And my wife's sort of strategy is to take things much more slowly and be much more introspective. And like the fact that we do those things drives the other crazy at times, but we also balance each other out at times. And every time I find myself getting frustrated with that, I have to remind myself, hey, look, that's her way of grieving. And also in the context of, kind of a dad specific discussion, I think like, there are certain things that will affect your wife potentially, and the certain things that will affect you. Like I remember we were at a wedding last summer, and we're at the reception, and it was a good friend of ours. Her son was getting married, and when it came time for the bride, or the mother of the groom, to do their first dance, that's when Sarah lost it, right? Because like we have a son with HIE, and that hit home. And it didn't affect me at all. Like I just didn't even think about that at the time, and she had to leave the room. And I was like, wow, yeah, this really is kind of a different journey for her. But at the same time, it's like she doesn't really think about wanting to, wishing I was complaining about travel baseball, and, having conversations about Star Wars with Cole, and stuff that I don't get to necessarily have that affect me as a dad, And so I think, recognizing that this is a form of grief that really, it just doesn't go away. It never stops. Grief is a lifelong thing, and it just kind of shows up unannounced sometimes and in different shapes and forms. And it looks differently for men and women. It looks differently for dads and moms. And I think that's a thought that bears repeating and reminding a lot.
Absolutely.
I can share. It's funny you say about the bridal dance, by the way, Andy, because that was very similar to the very first time my wife and I, our very first sort of outing together. And we watched friends of ours have their first dance, but it was at the wedding that we realized our world was very different. Mm-hmm. And we had changed quite dramatically. My wife had become more introverted and shy and anxious, and I was hypervigilant. I couldn't relax. I had tension in my shoulders. We realized our lives were never going to be the same again. And we cried all the way home thinking about how, we were grieving like you are. So I totally agree with what you've just said there. And I think if I was to add some advice or something I'd love to say is when you're on your journey, for me, once I realized that I was part of a village, even though I didn't realize I was in one, and that I could also create other villages and add to that village and wrap that around my son and my family and me individually or my wife, the better I felt. And, that might come with a little bit of sacrifice. Like I sacrificed a little bit of my ego, my own pride. I still have a lot of it. I just realized that I just can't be so wankery about it. I still want to, be manly and fix things and do things and be competitive and watch sport and do all those things. But I've also realized that I'm part of that village, and sometimes I need to recruit people to help me and ask for their support. And if I have to ask them, can you cook us some food or something like that? We've only done that twice, but there's been times where we've really been so on our knees where we've needed people to do a food. I don't know if you guys call it a food train or a cooking train, where they take days and helping you. And we only did that for a week, a couple of times now. But God damn, it really does make you realize that there are people that love you and that people that will support you, and have stuck with you through and through. So when you realize that, when we look through the lens of grief and sadness and anger, quite often we're pushing people away, or we view them in a light that we shouldn't be. But then if we realize that they're there for love and they're there for us, it changes your whole perspective on everything. That's not going to take away the hardships that you're going to go through, but what it will do is realize that you're not alone. And that lonely part is a large chunk of your grief and your anxiety and all the pain that you go through. Yeah.
I really
I feel like sorry, mate, go on.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, and I really love what you said about you need to create that village, because it's often the same people before this happened may not be the people that are going to support you. They may still love you. They don't know what to say, and like you said, you realize you're in totally different worlds now. You have different things to talk about. You're different people, so yeah, create that village and appreciate all of that, and it makes me think about how I think being willing to admit that we're weak, that we've hit limits. And I think I saw myself, my wife and I both, for a while, I felt like would take turns burning out, and then the other person would step it up, and then they would burn out. And especially as a dad, I just really thought I should be able to handle all of this. But Andy, as you pointed out, the grief and just it's okay to have these emotions. It's okay to have sorrow. And Rom, your openness about the PTSD and like this is real trauma. Realizing that you have those weaknesses, and they're not. That doesn't mean you're less of a person. And then how do you deal with that? So I realized I had very little free time, between taking care of my family and work. And so I had to make that count. And so realizing what activities charge me up, make me a better dad, a better person, what helps me just have clarity. So for me, it was exercising, which has the double benefit of helping me try and protect my back as my son gets bigger. He's a heavy one.
I hear you.
Yeah. I'm like, this is really discouraging math. If he's 40 pounds, I'm in my 30s. This is not going well. I better do something. So yeah, go to the gym, exercising, getting outside. It's I think a lot of us don't make a big deal about the things we miss out on that are not recharging us. But yeah, it involves a lot of saying no to those things and accepting help and saying yes to things that are going to make us stronger dads in the long run.
I think a common thread I've noticed throughout this whole discussion is that, like you just mentioned, saying no to things, and Ram mentioned earlier, like he used to be a people pleaser, and not so much anymore. Like I find that my give a shit-o-meter has gone down on like the really the less important stuff, and that is a blessing. I mean, it's much easier for me to if I don't want to go, if I've got some kind of social engagement, like no, I'm not going to that. You can blame it. Oh, my son's having seizures. Yeah, I can't make it. And that's always like a built-in excuse to get out of stuff. But do things that fill you up and recharge you. Working out is big for me too. I mean, that's I got to get. If I don't get my workout in, it's not going to be a good day. So yeah, it's nice. It's liberating to have the give a shit-o-meter get a little lower sometimes.
Well, I just want to thank all three of you so much for joining us tonight. I know that everyone here and everyone that watches this video later on our YouTube channel is going to get so much out of this. So just from everyone in the Hope for HIE community and from all the other dads and families, I just want to thank Brandon, Ram, and Andy so much for joining us today. Thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Bye-bye.